Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sat means truth, logos means a study or science. Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science of fake lie imagination or study of fake lie imagination. Today, I have a very, very special guest, an economist from Bombay, India's financial capital. And I love to call it Bombay. And for those who get offended, I'll call them Mumbai. So both of you should be happy and be happy, stay happy. So we are going to discuss something which is on everybody's mind today, everybody's mind, and which is going to affect the whole world. So without delay, let us welcome Dr. Sumeet Mehta. Namaskar, Sumit ji. Welcome to the
Namaskar.
show.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your talk, Sattology. And I'm indeed very happy and to be part of this talk.
So you have been in corporate finance, and your profile is very public, and your articles also get published in First Post, which is considered a very reputable publication in India. Now, my question to you is: so, as a finance professional, how are you looking at the sanctions diplomacy of the United States?
Well, US has always used this sanction diplomacy as a arm of its foreign policy to further its foreign policy objectives. Be it in the past when there was sanctions imposed on India after we tested the nuclear devices in Pokhran under the leadership of Prime Minister Vajpayee, or to other countries, including Iran. But I believe beyond a point, those kind of sanctions don't work because the world has various other means and ways to surpass and circumvent the sanctions. US has been trying to work on sanctions against Iran for such a long time. What happened? Nothing happened. Iran is trading with everyone. With India, it has a food for oil program. We have a rupee real swap. We have been importing oil from Iran in huge quantity. Rather, many of our refineries are designed to only operate on, or rather consume, Iranian light sweet crude. So, they cannot migrate to a heavy SAR crude coming in from other sources. So we have been using it. I remember there was a time when Mrs. Hillary Clinton, as the Secretary of State, was in India, and simultaneously we had an Iranian delegation in India for the trade talks. So India has been dealing with Iran. There could be other reasons America has not pushed because they cannot push beyond the point. And I think these kind of sanctions, Russia will also manage to scrape through the sanctions. And now with the advent of cryptocurrency, uh, I don't think things can move so very easily. Again, there is a bigger angle. US itself is importing crude oil from Russia. Europe itself is importing gas from Russia. Now, in that case, how can the sanctions work when you are not ready to accept or you impose sanction on one product which is very critical to you? So this is only a hoax. This is only a showdown to bully some countries who will succumb to American pressure. Beyond that, I don't see anything in the sanctions.
The biggest, the worry for Indian government is because we trust everybody very easily, right? So we have found a new friend and who was speaking all the good languages and good words to all of us, and it is an Indian nature to trust. In Bombay, everything works on trust or God. We both are from Bombay. We can share very easily. Right?
True, true, very true.
So if you go in a train and if you look both sides, all the people are praying to someone. There is a temple on both sides.
Exactly.
So we
In God
trust.
we trust is in our nature, whereas it is only on the dollar notes, currency notes in US.
Exactly. Over there, it's all words.
Hmm.
And so now, when we talk from a Bombay perspective, realistic perspective, like the discussions that we have on cutting chai and everywhere else, and then at that level, if you say realistic way, so what do you think for a common man in India thinks of this entire Russian sanctions, American sanctions on Russia, or how? What is America's role in the common man?
I don't think a common man is really bothered, except for a very small section of people who are either politically inclined or people who are interested in geopolitics or international relations, uh, or some finance professionals or other professionals. Otherwise, nobody is interested in anything. They are not even worried. For them, life is as usual, be it during lockdown, be it during the war, during anything, they are least concerned. It doesn't matter to them. Beyond a point, here we have to also see that India is not so very heavily dependent upon US in terms of the economic dependence. So on the street, a person in Bombay or in Delhi would really not matter. It doesn't matter to him. He has braved the whole pandemic, lockdown. He has braved all the difficulties for him, US and the sanctions. If in case US manages to put some, which I don't believe US can ever do in case of India, they'll only keep on threatening, but they cannot do any sanctions. But for a common man, wo sanction kya hai? What is this sanction? It doesn't matter to them. For them, life is as usual. They don't have to worry, and they're least concerned.
And one of the things about the president of the United States generally, maybe it's a colonial legacy that they think that they're the president of the whole world. Is somewhere that is in their mind. So
Hmm.
they'll sanction Burma. Nobody cares. No, Burma is living in sanctions for so many decades now. So one
I
more addition.
remember I
Yeah.
remember my client was in Burma. I was supposed to go there for some transactions. And the first thing we realized in Burma, when people go for shopping of expensive thing, they carry a bag full of currency notes, because when the military junta rule was imposed for the first time, they nationalized the banks and the deposits. Thereafter, no Burmese puts money in banks. They keep all the money with them in cash or in other forms. I was shocked that the people don't do banking over there. So now, even if America imposes sanction, it hardly matters. And there are ways and means to circumvent everything. Even imports, if they are importing, there are ways. We call it in the Indian trade language, it is called hawala, which is transactions in which money is transferred separately beyond the banking channels. So there is no problem. They don't have face any problem because they are not dependent upon America or the SWIFT system or the banking system for anything. What is happening? They don't have to worry.
So in this, I would call it a U.S.-Russia conflict. Ukraine is just a pawn, and it's a good lesson for the whole world that you appoint a comedian, then this is what happens. And
True.
so
True.
in this entire conflict, the maximum gamut of sanctions have been put, which can be seen. Now, only thing remaining is to take Russia out of UN, then United Nations breaks up, or to take UN to take all the trade, but they cannot build a wall around Russia. They cannot do that. That's the only thing remaining now, building a physical wall, so nobody comes out. So, so what is the economic challenges that India sees now? That where to what extent US can go, and India has a significant hardware from US in the Indian military. India has significant American technology is being used somewhere in defense sector, largely defense sector, not in civilian. In civilian sector, Indian IT professionals can create another Microsoft, I'm sure. So what do you have to what are the challenges that you see?
I don't see any challenge because first thing is US is doing the browbeating business of threatening India with CATSA and other sanctions, which will not work because in the past US has uh, tried to impose, and thereafter they gave us a specific waiver in CATSA even when we were dealing with Iran, and even when we ordered S-400 missile system, defense system from Russia. The reason is very simple. US can give this kind of threats, but US knows very well that India is the only hope for US in the Indo-Pacific region. They cannot push India out of the US orbit at any cost and consequences. Because if India is pushed out of the orbit thanks to sanctions, if in case they manage to impose, first thing, India doesn't become a ally of America in countering the rise or curbing the hegemony of China in the region. Point number one. Second, what will US do if it imposes this kind of sanctions? The dependence that the US has on India in terms of providing technology support, infrastructure support, coding, who is going to do it? We are exporting around, $300 billion worth of, $30 billion worth of pharmaceuticals. Who is going to provide that? So they are dependent upon India for cheap labor, for cheap raw materials, cheap finished goods, the way they are dependent upon China. They cannot impose sanctions on India in any case. They will only keep on threatening. They may at max try to not supply us some things, but without that, India has done. And wherever they required something, like look at uh, the US stopped exporting or allowing India to import raw material for vaccines. Finally, they had to move back. They had to take back their own decision and supply the raw material. So there's no option. They can keep on talking, but there is no way that they can sanction India, because as much as India is independent, and you look at the India's foreign policy, it is very clear. We have been equidistant from US and Russia at the same time, and we are trading with both. Of course, Russia is a very minor trading partner for India on all the other things except for defense equipment, and we are doing well with both the sides, and US is not doing anything. They can keep on talking. I'm not worried about it.
It has been a American State Department foreign policy to keep Asia divided.
Yes,
All the major powers in Asia divided.
yes.
Pakistan, they use Pakistan whenever they want to fight against India. They have done in the past. They keep
Hmm.
China as a big bully of the region. That is American media propaganda.
Yes.
And they want to keep Russia and China separate from each other. But they are now brought them closer. And and throughout the ASEAN countries have also seen the threat of American dollar de-dollarization. Countries like Vietnam, countries like you have various countries like Vietnam who have fought the wars against Russia, against USA. So they want to keep them a little bit more distant because they have lost the war against Vietnam, then Middle East. Now, but there is no India has a act East policy now, and there is nothing which India has done to expand the trade so far. And and the Quad is again Australia, US, and Japan and UK, which is again a different problem right now, because all three countries are the US, UK, and Australia are also, they have a separate military alliance also. Should this fail, then they have another military alliance. So what it shows, that it's a military domination, and when the Quad comes in, China gets even more threatened. So don't you think that this kind of vision is there in India also, that they are being divided again on lines?
I think yes, I agree with you in totality. Rather, the two most ancient civilizations and neighbors are India and China. And we know scholars like Yuan Sang traveled from China to India in search of knowledge. So the problem lies with not the Chinese people, but the CCP idea of domination. At the same time, very big and the important thing is India understands that, if I have to quote Kissinger, that being enemy is worst, but being friend is fatal. That is the situation with everyone who has allied with the US. We know what happened to Pakistan. Pakistan has become a hellhole of jihadism and terrorism that is now hounding Pakistan itself, and Afghanistan is destroyed in the process. If you read the declassified strategy paper during the Trump's tenure, which he declassified before he remitted office, was about the strategic framework for Indo-Pacific region. And it is very clear, he has written that very clear in the document, that US will ally and partner with China wherever beneficial. Okay, so first thing is US has no problem with China. US understands, and this is a document which many people, including me, have read. US has no problem with China. They are only looking at China from with a only with a concern that China is now trying to bully US, and that is what US is not ready to accept. But we can read the document, we will understand that US wants to use India to counterbalance, and this is a word written in that particular document, that as a counterbalance to the rise of China. So they are making two cats fight so that they can have the cake. That doesn't work, and I think everybody in India also understands there is a huge anti-US kind of belief system, people who will not prefer to be with US. Even when you look at the public opinion amongst the educated class, who are very briefly aware about the politics, they are anti-US, they are pro-Russia at this moment. There were a few channels who went anti-Russia, but they had to change the stance because the viewers are also not comfortable hearing the anti-Russia stance on those news channels. That is the situation right now in India. So I don't think US is really, India really looks upon the US government, while they would be really open with the US people because it's one of the thriving democracies and a liberal society. But people understand, what Indians understand, what the US government does, be it Democrat or Republican.
So when you look at the UK is a British colony, Canada is a British colony, US is a British colony. Native Americans are nowhere in the government actually, nowhere. All European Americans are in the government. Someone is Irish, someone is Italian. Joe Biden is Irish, someone is Italian, and the vice president is Jamaican and Indian. And which is, she doesn't call herself Indian; she calls it Jamaican more than Indian. And then you have, so all these are immigrants, and most of them are settlers, European settlers. European settlers, the way they conquered India through the US, through their settlers wars, is very well documented in American history. How many people were killed, and they have shown the numbers much lesser than what actually happened over there. Native Americans, when they say about it, they say that we were 100 million people, now we are left to only 7. Luckily, in COVID period, they grew 2 million. So it is 7 million now. So it's a big number growth. Suddenly it comes up in 7 million now. So now coming to the dollar as a standard of reserve currency globally. Most of the Indian foreign reserves are in UK banks, British bank. Gold is in the British banks, Bank of England and Bureau of International Standards, BIS. These are the two banks which are storing international settlement, sorry. And these are the two banks storing India's gold, of whatever India owns the gold. And the US is storing most of the, in American ADRs, storing the dollars. Now, if hypothetical scenario, both are taken away and the SWIFT is taken away, what happens to Indian economy?
I think this is a draconian situation and a scenario that you have proposed, or rather, you are trying to visualize. I understand the implications, and they are not really very easy in this situation because US is one of the largest trading partner of India, followed by Europe. Uh, we may manage to some extent in converting our oil trade into non-dollar terms. Like with Russia, we are negotiating a rupee ruble swap. With Iran, we are negotiating and finalizing a rupee real swap. Okay, and till 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were importing oil in huge quantity from Iran, which has reduced significantly right now. But again, we can, with the rupee real trade, we can again increase the share of Iranian oil, which in a way is a bit costlier compared to the SAR heavy crude that we import from other countries. So, but I think we have options available, but it will be the impact will then to be heavy because borrowings, repayments of loans, thereafter, very importantly, the trade with US and Europe will all get hurt very significantly due to the moving out of, if India is moved out of SWIFT. So to that extent, I believe there is a concern on that front. However, India has realized that we may face this kind of problem. And going forward, we will need our own technology platform for our own international trade. Now, India has deployed UPI in, that is a unified payment interface in Nepal. Of course, Nepal trades in Nepal. Rupee is used on the streets as well. It is one of the currencies in the country. But if that can be, the technology can be scaled up, it can be integrated with the financial institutions in various countries, and we create a kind of alternate platform to SPFS, that is the Russian payment system, and the SIPs. Then I think we can also create one more payment system in which we can involve many banks. But it is going to take a lot of time. Today, the sanctions are working in case of Russia because out of more than 40,000 institutions, hardly 400 to 500 institutions have been onboarded on the Russian platform. So we will have to kind of scale up the network, but at the same time, till the crude trade is dollar denominated, till petrodollar dominates the world, it will be difficult for India to heavily de-dollarize its trade, or rather it is the case for all the countries across the world. That But over a period of time, I believe that de-dollarization will be a new thing which will keep on picking pace. I believe China is now looking at internationalization of yuan. They will also go aggressively for de-dollarization. Now the way Russia America has acted, they have pushed Russia into the arms of China. Let me give you a transaction, a hypothetical transaction. Russian oil is sold and the payment is made to China against something else. Or maybe the invoicing is done from China and the crude tankers leave from Russia. Or material is moving out of Russia, but the billing invoicing is happening from Hong Kong or China. And the payments are made to China and thereafter they transfer it to Russia. Who is going to stop it? Who is going to control it? We have seen that in case of Iran sanctions, that payments were made through UAE based banks, and the oil and the other crude based products and other products from Iran were sold worldwide. Even they were importing and they were making importing from other countries, and they were making payments through through UAE. So these kind of actions don't really help anyone, neither US nor anyone else. So there will be ways and means. If they try to bully their way, there will be ways and means in which the alternative structures will be created. And for that matter, everybody knows that even if China openly supports and in helping Russia, US cannot sanction China, because otherwise within 15 days or a month, all the supermarkets and departmental stores will be empty because they are dependent upon Chinese raw material and finished goods. So how are they going to operate? So it doesn't work.
So one of the things which you correctly said, the whole world is looking at it, and the gold. So Russian currency is the only currency which is built on gold reserves now. For last 10, 20 years, they've done it.
Yes, 80% plus gold reserves.
80% plus gold reserves, and there only 20% is outside the gold. So it is a
Hmm.
very good standard. So now Russian ruble going down against dollar doesn't make sense, because dollar is built on military strength, which is waning.
Yes. Yes.
And the kind of influence America has shown. So the immediately, as soon as America puts sanctions, Australia is going to put sanctions, Japan is going to put sanctions, Europe is going to put sanctions, whosoever is in the American nuclear shield. So actually, the nuclear bomb is the new basis of dollar right now, and the only threat is Russian nuclear bomb. So now we already see. Actually, if you literally go back, this is what it is. That our ships can come to you, our 11 aircraft carriers can come to you, all these things can come to you. And from the Russian side is 6,000 nuclear bombs, which is guaranteeing the security of Russia. Now in Indian case, I do not know the actual number, but Carnegie Mellon took out to be around 2,000 nuclear bombs India can build, and Carnegie Mellon, the Mellon Institute. So this is what is maintaining the stability now. Is no more uh, all those I call it big talks that truth, human rights, justice, and US is not part of International Court of Justice. Also, you cannot sue them; they're not part of it. They do not agree to any UN resolution. Also, They've done it multiple times. So, and just yesterday, I think the news went unheard because all these factors have played a role in the economy. The stock markets, all those things are all volatile, built on international relations of trade and commerce. Everything is very much based on public opinion. Now, in this scenario, now this is a even bigger scenario than last time I said. Just one US it was, now it is a whole allied system. So does Indian economy or Indian businessmen, Indian finance, Indian defense have thought on these lines? Because it's literally like jiski lati uski bhais. That's exactly what is going on right now. And believe me, and I will go back. I'm an author of 11 books, and in the Mahabharat, exactly same thing. Narad Muni tells Yudhishthir. He says, Sanatan Dharma is protected by your Sanya Shakti, your military strength. So, are you ready that if somebody doesn't listen to you, you use your military strength? But India has been wearing a cloth of हमने किसी पे आक्रमण नहीं किया, हम तो किसी पे कुछ. Like, do you think such goodness can survive in this scenario?
I think that was the Nehruvian idea, which is no more working. And Prime Minister Modi has kind of shed away the baggage of Nehruvian and Gandhian policy burden that we are carrying for a very long time. First thing is you look at the diplomacy that Prime Minister Modi has done in terms of first the way he has managed to convince US even before. See, look at Katsa. India got a specific waiver. So India has shown that we are not siding with US as an ally of US. We are not going to be even with Russia as a kind of member of the bloc. Very importantly, let us look at the way India has approached this Ukrainian crisis and look at the statement of of India in the United Nations. It has condemned US for an aggressive way in which it is trying to push for the resolution, and it has not minced words. India has not minced words. It has openly said that we do not agree with this aggressive approach. At the same time, it has castigated Russia for taking or for being violent. Now, there is a rationale for India to be very neutral. And unfortunately, while I see that in American channels, the US channels are very unified in their uh, political stand in case of Russia, be it Fox News or a CNN. In India, we have a diverse opinion, with some being pro-Russia, some being anti-Russia, some being pro-America, some being anti-America. But what is India's stand? India has really shown the world that, guys, we are not dependent on anyone. Look at the sanctions imposed on India in 1998. What happened? Nothing. It was business as usual for most of the people. Only after the sanctions were lifted, it was only the foreign currency that came in into the country in form of foreign investments. Today, the kind of investments that US has done in Indian stock markets, that is exceeding a few hundred billions of dollars. How can they impose sanctions on us? What will happen to that money? They can't even withdraw that money. So there is nothing that they can do. They can only keep on screaming. And India understands. You look at discussed about Quad. US would ideally love Quad to be militarized with India, Japan, and Australia taking up the whole brunt so that they can sit back over there on the other side of Atlantic and push us into countering China. Okay. And India and Japan definitely face the problem of the rising hegemony and the bullying of China. But India has also been very sensible. It has not militarized Quad as of now. We are doing military exercises, but we are looking at trade. We are looking at interpersonal relations. Now, Australia is investing $1.5 billion or something in India. That's a small amount, but we have started doing some work together. So, US may try to militarize other countries. Look at the history of US and even USSR, the erstwhile Soviet Union. They kept the defense industry running at the cost of other countries. Pakistan buying, Iran buying, Iraq buying, India buying, all the countries buying American and Soviet weaponry, and those industries working on full scale. That is why we saw after the war started, Lockheed Martin and all the other defense stocks surged. This is, I would call it a Ukraine Defense Expo, where Russian and American defense equipment are put on display that see how it works. So now you start placing order. That is the, it is more of a defense expo. I don't see this as a real war. It is an economic war. Everybody wants their defense industry to run. In Russia, as of now, 25% of the manufacturing workforce is employed in defense sector. So everybody needs business, and Ukraine has become a dumping ground for the weapons to showcase that, okay, we have a good weaponry. But India is not biting the bullet of weaponizing Quad as of now. And that is why US had to go ahead with AUKUS. Australia, UK, US. What is the reason? Because they need an alternate weaponized organization to counter China. US is looking at pawns. They want countries to act as pawns in the region. If in case war happens, then it should be Indian or Japanese or some other people who should die in the war. Okay, so that US hegemony over the region continues. India understands that very well. There is no doubt, there's no second thought amongst the people that India does not understand the intention of US. And I believe India will fight its own battle with China, or maybe if China understands that there will be peace. But why should Indians become pawns, and why should we sacrifice our soldiers to help US in countering the rise of China? I'll just go back into Vajpayee's tenure, former Prime Minister Vajpayee's tenure. US wanted India to be part of the NATO forces in Afghanistan. What happened? There were many people then in even the cabinet, Vajpayee cabinet, who wanted that to happen. But sense prevailed, sagacity prevailed, and late Prime Minister Vajpayee was an amazing scholar and understood the dynamics. He put his foot down and said Indian soldiers will not step into Afghanistan. We'll support in all the other ways. We'll train the soldiers, we'll train the bureaucrats, we'll provide all the assistance. We'll build dams, we'll build the Parliament House, we'll build uh, power transmission lines and everything. We'll help them in other ways, but we'll not send our soldiers. And we have built our respect over there as a neutral country. So I don't think we'll do the same. We'll continue to repeat the same stance that will not be part of the militarized, axis of US.
There is one very interesting story on this recent actions, that one of the diplomats in the US administration, their job is to call up these countries aggressively for voting to be together with them through coercion. If you don't do this, like the 16 African countries rejected American call, they voted for Russia openly in the UN, in the United Nations General Assembly. And the many African Union leaders spoke against the American hegemony openly. Now, I'm sure all those countries will get sanctions. I'm 100% sure, because they keep a note and they start putting the sanctions on where they can hurt most, because they control it. They know it. And if they do not control it, then UK controls it. Some of the other allies control it. That's how they work together. It's like sometimes you can call it a pack of wolves attacking any other person. You can see that happening. Now, if you understand this kind of working style they have, and India also has a huge influence in Africa for some other reasons, but Indian Foreign Office has not worked so proactively so far yet. Even though they've been successful in maintaining neutrality, but still they have not worked so far. Do you think that this entire incident between the US and Russia, is mainly US and Russia, that will the Indian Foreign Office also change the way of working?
I would go a step ahead. First, I agree with you on sanctions, and US has another stick in its armory, and that is non-trade barriers. They will not impose sanctions, but they can create another kind of hoax. First thing is anti-dumping duty. Second thing is they will say that particular products cannot be imported because there is an implication of child labor, or there is human rights violations, or there is an impact on the environment. So they can use other ways of hurting the countries by banning those products or imposing such a high anti-dumping duty or an entry barrier onto the products into US that those products may not be viable, or else the people in those particular countries will have to sell at an extremely low price to some other country through which that product will reach US. US has done that with India also, and India won the case in WTO. They tried to do that with Indian steel. They imposed anti-dumping duty, and we won the case in WTO, where we proved that we are more profitable at the same prices at which US companies also manufacture steel and sell in the market. It is because the US companies are incompetent, because they have a high cost structure, that they are not able to become profitable, but and we are able to be profitable. So US will be doing all these things. My view is very simple. In till 2014, India did not explore Africa as a continent for foreign policy. Rather, we did not have embassies and missions in many parts of Eastern Europe as well. Forget Africa. And now we have opened up some 30 plus missions over there in Africa. We are strengthening our ties. We have built up good relations by giving free vaccines to many African countries, supporting them with PPE kits and other things. Rather, that was also one of the reasons why US did not want to allow exports of vaccine raw material into India, because India was giving away vaccines for free to African countries. So we have done our diplomacy. Whether diplomacy will be used, this diplomacy will be used as a bargaining chip and to show the power at this moment, or whether we may do it later, or we may have, we can build a soft power first and show the power later. I don't know, but we have definitely, India has built up a reputation in the whole of African continent, be it South Africa up to the northern tip. So I don't see a problem, and I'm very positive that whenever India uses it, it will be in a very constructive manner. I India will be able to replace, because see, African countries need medicines. Who provides them medicine right now? It is coming from India. Who can afford to buy medicines and pharmaceutical products from US, which are at such a high price? Even US is buying it from India. Forget everything. So this is how the things are going to move. And we, if they try to impose sanctions on Africa, it is not going to benefit them, because as such their trade with Africa is minimal, and we'll replace them.
So American sanctions actually work against Americans. It can actually boost the ego of some American State Department officials, which is the Foreign Office of India of USA. But it actually hurts more Americans. You can see
Yeah,
the
look at you can look
inflation.
at see that in case of Iran, how many years Iran is living under sanctions? What has happened to Iran? The pistachio is being exported in huge quantity. The oil is getting exported in huge quantity. The saffron is getting exported in huge quantity. People are going there, traveling, enjoying the Iranian meals on the street food joints. People are going, coming, everything is happening. What is the problem? It's only on paper that America has imposed sanctions.
Yeah, Iranian saffron comes through Spain to US. So they all have found the
See,
ways.
so you know it. So
And
African material will also come to India or UAE. From UAE, it will get re-exported, or it may go to some European country, or who knows? London may import it and then export it to US.
exactly. And Americans are paying more price for it.
That's the worst.
That's the worst. So they could have got it directly, but because of sanctions, now they're paying double the price. The inflation in the US has touched 9%. I would believe it is 11% with the gas taxes, the gas high, and it is the highest in the world. Even Indian inflation is lower than that. Indian
Very much
inflation
so.
is 7% right now, which is
Yes.
4% lower. Now, now this is something I will give huge credit to the American designers of the economy. America is the net consumer of the whole world. Just 300 million people, and so many countries are dependent on it. I mean, is it real economy or what is going on? How is
I'll
it
put it
possible?
differently. I'll put it differently. Uh, Look at US. They are importing everything from every other country on this planet. Look at China. China has a foreign exchange reserves of around $3 trillion. What they did, they kept on exporting to US. US said, I don't have money. There are two options. Either I'll print currency and give it to you, I can give you dollars. Or you take away treasury bills. I'll pay you 25 basis point interest on that, and you enjoy. What is happening today is US is like that particular, I can say, a traditional businessman who is buying against hundi. If you remember the word hundi in
That's,
India,
that's right.
a promissory note, treasury bill is a promissory note. that okay, I'll pay you in the future. Now when it comes over, it is again rolled over and a new promissory note is issued.
That's
And
right.
US is thereafter, that money that is kept in US or what is generated in US is invested in other countries at a return of 18%, 20%, 24%.
That's
So
right.
US is actually an arbitrage economy wherein they are importing everything against giving 25 basis point interest on the treasury bills, and people are forced to hold that dollar that doesn't have any value. It has value only because of the US Marines who can step on moon if they want to impose democracy. Of course, moon must have a lot of oil to justify invasion of or rather liberation of moon. But coming back to the point, it is an arbitrage economy and they are spending money. Look at the internal system of US. Everybody is debt ridden. Maximum people are debt ridden. Everybody is living on, a payday check kind of thing. The money comes, it is used for repaying the credit card bills or paying off the credit card bills. What is the kind of economy this is? Everybody is spending, and that is why the economy is running. If they convert it into an Indian economy where people first allocate money for savings, that okay, 15 or 20% of the money has to be first invested, and thereafter balance we'll see what has to be done. In that also, if we can save, again we'll invest more. So if imagine if this happens in US, then what will be the size of the economy and what will be the kind of decline in the consumer spending in US? They've made it a overtly materialistic, consumeristic society in which people are living under the burden of debt, under the burden of credit card bills. The banking system is also fragile because of that, and we don't know. This is another ticking time bomb. That is why American government had to give money to the people during pandemic so that they can sustain themselves. It was also to help the bank sustain.
The economy of 300 million people consuming the largest FDI in the history of the world on the Hundi economy, that's the right word actually, Hundi economy, total arbitrage, one hedging against another hedge against another hedge. And
Hmm.
that's how the income levels are kept up stable,
Hmm.
which is, and just giving money and salaries to people for the same work, which can be done at a much lower cost within
Hmm.
United States. So now with this economic backdrop of 300 million people working against 7.5 billion people or 7.1 billion people. Now, how long do you think the whole thing can last? It's unrealistic now, totally unrealistic.
It is impossible. See, it is the downturn of US. What happened? What is happening with US after the withdrawal from Afghanistan is the beginning of the story of what happened to Western Europe, especially UK, after before the First World War. Now, the US hegemony in global politics is also being challenged. Why could Russia do this so very confidently this time? Because they know that now US is a softer state under the new leadership. And in this situation, they don't have an option. Slowly, how long can they keep on sending their military everywhere to protect the dollar? Dollar is sustaining only because the military will go everywhere to force themselves on that particular country who will try to dislodge US and petrodollar in the world trade. So I don't see now what can US do. It will sustain for 10, 15, 20 years, but we are seeing the rise of, the new world order in making, which will probably be a bipolar or a multipolar world. I don't know what could be the situation. Maybe we need another 10, 15, 20 years to understand what will be the shape of the new world order, what would be the kind of new world order. But it will be a de-dollarized thing, maybe by 35, 40, 2035, 2040. Dollar will be out.
Now, one last question. Now, democracy. Democracy has been used as a tool to change governments.
Yes.
Now, and democracy exporting means that I can easily interfere in your system because you're following my system. There's a better understanding now. That's how the democracy is imposed on everyone. And American democracy is questioned now by Americans only. Like I have so many of my neighbors, they question the election all the time. They show the validity of election. Now, the second part, because I have to combine because of the time thing. Uh, the second question is the United Nations Commonwealth. I've written a lot in my books also, Gold, Glory, and God. I've covered it, and on many articles all over the Indian press and also American press. Now, in both the scenarios, now you have the United Nations, Commonwealth. These are all the organizations, they maintain colonial hegemony. United Nations itself is an example of colonial hegemony. So now in completely controlled by the American dollar. First of all, it is in the United States. It is in New York actually, and also they have a they have a say where America is a maximum giver, $71 billion annually. They give to the United Nations, which Trump wanted to actually stop. So now, and you also covered the current president. So I have to also, at the third question, I'm combining. So you can answer all three together. If Trump was the president, then what would have happened in the Russia, this war? So please go ahead.
I don't know, or I'm not sure whether this kind of issues would have arisen if Trump would have been around, because Trump was actually the only American president who did not start a war, invade a country, and the withdrawal from Afghanistan was very abrupt under President Joe Biden's initiative, the way he has managed it. And I believe former President Trump could have managed it much better. In terms of whether Russia would have taken such a daredevil step or a drastic step, I don't think it would have happened. Of course, we should be aware that Zelensky was implanted as a president by CIA and by Soros, and it was only to extend NATO to the borders of Russia. But whether President Trump would have allowed it, I think President Trump could have handled it much better. That is my personal view. People may have a different view than me on this particular issue.
You did not answer the first part, the democracy and
Oh,
the
democracy,
role
I
of
think,
international
see,
organizations like UN.
democracy, see, first thing is democracy is a hoax. We have seen that in Ukraine, the way they kind of played with the democracy. We know how US has worked with dictators in the past. Okay, in countries like Iraq and everywhere, they've flirted with dictators, be it Gaddafi, be it Saddam Hussein. Who are they? They're all people who are very close to US. When they talk about democracy, it is only that they want to interfere into that particular country. As about UN, the world order that they wanted, a fair world order, they have never worked on that. Rather, League of Nations failed because could not provide a just world, and that is why Second World War happened. Of course, people were tired. I think Cold War was the reason why open wars did not happen. But if we have to take Cold War, then it can be called as a Third World War, which was not very prevalent everywhere and people were not disturbed. But disturbance kept on happening, and so many countries got crippled by coups and by Russia bringing in their puppets and America bringing in their puppets to run the whole thing in that particular country. The regime being remote controlled either from Moscow or from Washington D.C. and UN was sitting. And whereas America honored the UN resolutions, never. Today, if you look at, even Prime Minister Modi has made this statement on the floor of the UNGA that there is a need for democratizing UNGA itself and bring in more countries, because the world order has changed. There are bigger countries who are not getting represented in the UNGA properly. And there should be more countries who should be getting veto, the P5 members. That has to be expanded. And Prime Minister Modi has also discussed this on the floor. So, but UNGA is more of a very undemocratic cartel of a few countries who is managing the whole thing. I would say that it is a status quo. People are preferring to go for it because they don't want this status quo to get upset so very quickly, or they will wait for someone else to take a initiative to kind of upset the apple cart, and then the things will start changing. But if in case, whenever Third World War happens, if in case, I pray it doesn't happen, but it will be due to the failure of United Nations and the way it has not worked in the right sense in providing a just world and a right world order.
You know, actually, you are putting so many words into my mouth now to ask you. So if India is already coming into the bed with Quad and other things, how can it become the pole in a new world order? Because they're already part of the American system.
No, see, the thing is, India is part of all the systems. India is creating its own system in form of BIMSTEC, okay, wherein it is having the whole of Burma and other South Asian countries and Sri Lanka. So they call it the Bay of Bengal countries. The countries were abutting the Bay of Bengal. So we are creating our own smaller world order with like-minded people who believe in democracy. India is rather one of the oldest democracy. People look at India that okay, Indian democracy India become a democratic republic on 26th of January 1950. That is a lie. That is something that anyone who has even 0.001% understanding of Indian history, they will say that India's democracy uh, preceded Athenian and Greek democracies by a few millennia, a couple of
Exactly. I
millennia.
mean, I can tell you, Ramayana says Hanuman tells Bhim in Mahabharata about Loktantra in Ramayana period. So it's a very old system. Lokatantra is very old system.
And the thing is, it is well documented. It is
Well
again,
documented.
it is well documented and it goes beyond everything. And, what can be called as mythology as per the Western parlance. But this is something which is well documented. It can be evaluated, and it is not just then, even in 2500 BC or even before that, in, 3000 BC, Panini has very clearly written that there were more than 500 Janpadas, which are what? They were republics.
That's right.
Okay, and that was the time when Athenian revolution started and they started experimenting with democracy.
That's right.
Whereas we had a well-entrenched democracy. So America teaching us about democracy is something, it is laughable. We know democracy better. We were Democrats, we were Republicans much before America was created.
That's why we have the word Sattology, not mythology.
Exactly. I like that word because of the same reason. Because there is sattva in it.
The root word, Sat,
Mm,
the Dhatu is there, Dhatu, Sattology,
mm,
which is science of truth,
mhm,
so study of truth.
mhm.
Thank you so much, Sumit ji. And I could have gone on and on, but if you make it too long, the people don't watch the videos. People have that. But I'm sure this video will be watched by everybody because they will see the entire gamut of discussion. But in the end, if you want to conclude, like, so how will India stand up to all these changing American politics? Because Americans are controlling or initiating these changes. They are the ones who are initiating. So how will India react overall now, and what is the future of India looks like?
See, India will take a principle centric stand. It will not be driven by any self interest. It will not be driven by any short term interest. It will not be driven by succumbing to the political pressures either by America or by their agents in India. India will take a principle centric stand. We know what we are looking at. We are going to walk on this path. There may be difficulties coming, and we'll face it, but will not abandon that. We in the past have abandoned on various occasions, but under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, we are not going to do that. We'll keep on walking. India, this is the century of India. We are going to work. We are going to provide everything to the world. We have the right intent. We don't want to dominate anyone. We don't want to misuse any country for furthering our foreign policy. And it will be a just world that we are looking. So there is a saying that truth can face difficulties, but truth can never be defeated. So that is what India will. That is the future of India, and that is the journey of India.
One thing is that if you look at Ramayana, Ravan's Lanka was in the middle of the ocean, as per Valmiki, and the middle of the ocean, but still Ram Setu was built. And it's an analogy. I would not like to complete it, but people can understand that still is going to happen because it is adharma cannot survive anywhere, and untruthfulness, and Machiavellian manipulation doesn't last a long time, because intelligent people still control this world, and good people who have a good heart. And
Chanakya was born a couple of millennia before Machiavelli. So
correct.
we understand that things also. Arthashastra and Kautilya Niti or Chanakya Niti was much before the Prince was written.
That's
So
right.
we understand those things, but what is important is the foundation what is the foundation of our policy? What is the foundation on which we are standing? If
Yeah,
it is dharma, if it is truth, people look at dharma from a definition that it is religion, but the definition of dharma is dhareti iti dharma. What do you behold?
that's
If
right.
I behold truth within me, everything will be right. And that is principle centric approach of India.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the West thinks they are the controllers of truth. That their version is the truth. And like they say, you have to be on the right side of history. But actually, the right side of history is actually the right side of history, not the history. History is in the center. So anyway,
Yes.
so we don't have to be on the right side of history or the left side of history. We have to be on the side of the history, itihas. What happened actually? And the world has a very short memory, and that's why the Puranas were written so that we can be reminded of what happened. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And I'm really, 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 what a wonderful discussion we had. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Namaste.
Namaste.